Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Verner Ayukegba. I am a Senior Vice President with the Africa Energy Chamber. And we are here today because of the launch of the Africa Energy Chamber book, Africa Energy Road to Recovery, How the African Energy Sector Can Reshape Itself for a Post-COVID-19 Comeback. Thank you very much to everybody who's dialed in from across the world. We have an esteemed panel today with us, and we are looking to tease a little bit what the book is about, but also to explore how best to strengthen Africa's energy sector in a post-COVID new normal. Now, COVID-19 has been with us for about a year, and it is no news to everybody that that has led to significant changes, not just in the energy sector, but across the board in the world economy. And countries all over the continent have certainly felt it in different ways and are responding in many different ways, as well as companies in the sector. The Chamber thought it wise, due to our different activities in the sector, to explore what is going on and to potentially provide clear-cut solutions, recommendations on how different stakeholders could approach the challenges which come and which have come with COVID-19. I would introduce our panel today. We have Derek Campbell, who leads Energy and Natural Resources, Inc. Derek is with us, is an energy security specialist with decades of experience in the industry. We have my good friend Akinwole Omoboriowo II, who is the chairman and founder of Genesis Energy. We have Remi, who is here with us today from IFP, a world-renowned training institute. We have Mr. Kola Karim, who is here with us, a long-time entrepreneur in the oil and gas sector with a proven track record over decades in developing E&P projects, both on the continent and beyond. We have Mr. Jovita Nsoh, who is from Microsoft and is in charge of developing strategy across the board for a lot of projects with Microsoft. And lastly, we have Nosizwe, who is a leading entrepreneur in the energy sector and has held senior positions both in government at the National Oil Company in South Africa. And so thank you very much, everybody, for being here and for being part of this discussion. We have over 100 participants who would then be asking questions at the end. I will start straight with Jovita and say, you sit at Microsoft and you have seen the technology component of workflows and of the energy sector increase significantly, not only in the energy sector, but across the board in the economy. Technology has become extremely important in being able to guarantee workflows and to guarantee success. What are you seeing with respect to technology being used in a post-COVID environment to sort of help the rebound in this industry, which has suffered so much? And what do you think Africa can do, African companies can do, African governments can do to leverage technology to be able to strengthen their energy industries and to be able to propel a quicker comeback from the downturn which we saw? Thank you.
Thank you, Verner. Thanks everyone for joining today. Again, as Verner mentioned, my name is Jovita Nsoh. I'm a principal strategist here at Microsoft. I've been with the company for a very long time. The question of technology in oil and gas is a topic that we're all familiar with. And when COVID-19 struck last year, it was a question of companies that have already embraced technology will benefit from their investments in technology. And the ones that have not really invested in technology were going to struggle because COVID-19 presented us with challenges that we're all aware of. Suddenly, you had lockdowns, people could not travel. In an industry that is totally globalized, you have to bring in experts from around the world to do any projects in remote parts of the world. And when you have lockdowns, right, where people could not fly from one country to the other or to leave their home to go to work, what do you have to do? You have to use technology. Work from home is the norm of the day. In normal times, we would be sitting in a conference room doing this session, but today we are all dialing in via Zoom, which is one of the technologies that really came to the forefront during COVID-19. What I will say here is that technology in the oil and gas industry has been a journey. And as you can see, COVID-19 actually came in the midst of what we all call the Industry 4.0, which is a digital transformational aspect of what we've been going through for the last 10 years or so. What Industry 4.0 really means is that companies are seeing a coming together of the physical world and the digital world in optimizing their operations, in improving their operational efficiency. And with COVID-19, it was just a question of Industry 4.0 is a reality. We want to make sure that we continue to articulate the importance of that in the oil and gas sector, which, as we all know, is usually behind in terms of technology adoption over the last several years, whether it's in the upstream, midstream, or downstream. So in brief here, Verner, what I will say is that in a post-COVID-19 world, what the Chamber has already done so well, and I've read this book already, is articulating in the book is the role of technology in oil and gas sector. And another challenge that I'll mention here is not only are we in the midst of COVID-19, but we are also in the midst of what we call energy transitions, right? Where these oil and gas industries are struggling to respond to regulatory challenges. They are struggling to respond to market forces in terms of embracing clean energy. So when, as a company, Microsoft has been a partner of all these oil and gas companies in helping them to navigate they call it the landscape, the regulatory landscape, in infusing technology into their operations and helping them embrace this, I would call it a revolution that is what we call Industry 4.0. So in a post-COVID-19 world, to be brief here, what we need to do as technologists, as policymakers, as the Chamber, is to continue to work with African companies to embrace Industry 4.0, to infuse technology at every aspect of their operation, whether if you're operating the midstream, upstream, or downstream. You want to make sure that everything you do is technologically aligned. Otherwise, you will be competitively disadvantaged.
Yes, thanks for that. Now, just probing a little bit into that, and this is something which is also covered in the book. Sometimes the upfront costs to adopt technology are prohibitive for some African mid-sized companies. Are there solutions there, or are there recommendations there which you can, put forward with respect to the way people need to view this, given that in the long term, possibly these technologies are going to overall reduce costs?
Correct. In the past, technology used to be a thing for the big companies. What we've done and seen over the last decade or so with cloud technologies, and today we talk about the edge, is the democratization of these awesome advanced technologies. What I mean by that is we are creating platforms that require minimal entry capital expense to go into. And by this, I mean cloud adoption. So for example, if you were to onboard your company onto Microsoft Azure, it would not require the expertise that you would have in say 5 years ago. You could run massive computational simulations in the cloud without needing somebody in high performance computing, right? You don't need to buy that heavy equipment as well. You don't need to build an office. You could just run that stuff in the cloud, run your simulation, take it back to the factory, and you're all set. So what I'm saying here is that as we look at the way technology adoption has shifted from CapEx intensive to OpEx, it makes it much more easy for smaller companies to get on board and leverage that.
Thank you, Jovita. Now, Remi, let me move on to you. We've just been speaking to Jovita about the importance of technology, adopting new technologies to be able to drive change and improvements in the energy sector in a post-COVID era. You are in training. I mean, IFP has been doing a lot of training over the last decades on the continent. What are you seeing with respect to training in the post-COVID environment? How easy or what are the challenges that you are seeing with respect to companies being able to adopt technology? So training which you, for example, provide with respect to new technologies in that sense. I was in Mozambique last week, and one of the main problems of developing the industry in Mozambique is around the lack of capacity. And so training is going to be extremely important. So we would like to hear from you what you are seeing with respect to challenges around training for the adoption of new technologies, but also across the board.
Okay, thank you very much, Werner. We are all here today to celebrate the book which is published by the AEC, and I'd like to come back on the subtitle of the book itself. You may have noticed that the subtitle is How the African Energy Industry Can Reshape Itself from a Post-COVID-19 Comeback. And I'd like to focus on the word itself, okay? Because future of Africa is mainly in hands of Africans, and I know it's a motto of the AEC. It does not mean that Africa is alone. Africa has partners. And Africa needs the rest of the world, and the rest of the world needs Africa, definitely. And it's not only a slogan, okay? This is, I'm deeply convinced of this. And when you mentioned, Werner, the example of Mozambique, it's a very good one, because should we wish that Mozambican people, they do it themselves, they need training, and they need in projects a part of local content, definitely. And Africa has the natural resources. Africa has established national oil companies. Okay, they are not perfect, but they have a crucial role for reshaping after the post-COVID. And let's go on in a little bit more details on the local content. We now need to turn from training to competency management, because getting a certificate of attendance after a training is not important. What is important is being trained to go from point A to point B while acquiring competencies, and this is the key. Okay? And in this respect, the public to private collaboration between NOCs and their international partner is very, very important. NOCs are working daily with international operators, and having projects to foster the local content is really the right way to build skills and to transfer knowledge. And there are several articles in the book which are dedicated to this. I noticed one about skill crisis, identification of skills gaps, the role of NOCs, and they approach this theme on both qualitative and quantitative point of views. And I feel this is a very good approach.
Thank you, Remi. So just before I move on, I just wanted to to get a little bit of the sense of the rate at which, technology, for example, is being adopted, training, online training, and all of that in an African setting.
It's a very good surprise of the last 12 months. We have been obliged to do so, and it works. We IFP training, we are currently running distance learning with people in Ivory Coast, in Senegal, in Nigeria, in Angola, and it does work. Okay, at least for part of the training competencies which you can transfer through distance learning. It does not work for everything, but at least a good part of it has been able to be achieved without difficulties, I should say.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now, let me move to Akinwole. I would like to probe a little bit what your views are, and some of those were shared in the book with respect to energy transition. There is an ongoing global discussion about energy transition, and that adds on, of course, to the difficulties which we have seen in the post-COVID era. Now, you are in the business of generating and distributing energy. We know that there is a significant need for energy on the continent. How do African countries meet the aspirations of their populations to be able to get them access to affordable and reliable energy, whilst at the same time trying to do justice to the current narrative around decarbonization?
Thank you so much, Verner, and greetings to everyone on the visit, and congratulations to the board and management of African Energy Chamber for this great book. It's a lot of sweat that has gone into it. It's produced very high quality information, articles, and great nuggets. And I strongly would commend that to everyone on the call to spend some time reading it. You'll find it most useful across the various segments of the oil and gas and power sector on the continent. I think that for Africa, the beauty of energy transitioning is that it's been a deliberate policy by most African countries pre-COVID. It was clear, flagged off mostly by Nigeria in the early 2000s and spreading very quickly across the continent. The notion around infusing technology in producing power, distributing it, infusing with cleaner form of energy, gas, renewable, etc. In de-architecturing the power sector, creating the various sectors around the grid-based power, the mini grids, the captive solutions, we found that there's been significant progress pre the COVID. And my point of view is that COVID has brought to fore the importance of accelerating that. So moving from a little down to 3 years ago, solar as a business was primarily, for example, focused on big projects, scalable projects. Gas-fired plants, which continues to remain part of the backbone of industrializing the country, were hitherto focused for grid-based power, or at the very minimum, large-scale power projects. But today, we see, and we continue to also invest in micro LNGs, micro distributed CNG, in macro distributed liquefied petroleum gas. And so we see that the progress around transitioning during the COVID period, the majority of the demand moved away from commercial and industrial usage to private, because frankly, like Jovita rightly said, most of us learned to work from home. There were essential services, of course, that remain active in the front line, themselves at risk. But the transition from, and I'm breaking down to segments again, from dirty fossil fuels of diesel and HFO to large-scale gas to power project, I think continues to speak itself in various countries in East Africa, in West, and of course in South Africa, where the dominant design for off-grid power today has remained solar off-grid and micro gas to power projects.
Okay, that's interesting. So if I understand you correctly, what you're essentially saying is that Africa is already on the way responding to that urge to transition with those changes, with solar expanding beyond just what you called scalable projects that were done in the past.
Correct.
So my question is, are we going to be able to reduce the wide between demand and the supply of energy following that path? Or do we have to continue also at the same time with traditional forms of energy provision in that sense to be able to meet the aspirations of our people?
I suspect, Verner, that is continuing to be a mix of solutions. Yes, the transitioning has started. The narrative around Africa rising, especially in the energy sector, around 2012, 2014, has become a main mantra. You go to almost any community today, you will find solar panels, solar systems, solar batteries, inverters, etc. Which are primarily within the suburban community, within the villages, we can batteries. First and foremost, because this product can go as low as 1 kilowatt consumption or less. And for those in those communities that is so expensive to build national grids, it's so expensive to build distribution networks. Verner, you cannot imagine the beauty and the joy they get when they're connected to the modern form of electricity championed by solar. My sense is over the next 10 years, the countries will continue to develop, gas-fired plants, solar, small hydro and large hydros. And it's a long, as you know, it's a long winding game. So it's not a silver bullet. So I foresee in the next 10 years, Africa to significantly reduce its carbon emission footprint by this energy transitioning approach.
Okay, thank you, Akin. Kola, one, and this is to Mr. Kola Karim. There is a question here which is essentially from Paul Joy asking, can African oil companies compete in a $30 per barrel environment? Before I let you answer, I just want to say, Kola, one of the things I enjoyed about this particular book actually was the recommendations around improving the operating environment in Africa. And essentially what the chamber was trying to do there is to say, how does Africa compete in its E&P space with new frontiers like Guyana, which everybody is going there and talking about how streamlined and how cost effective those particular basins are. So my question, or Paul Joy's question to you, essentially is, are African E&Ps able to compete and able to reduce their cost footprint to be able to compete in the new normal, especially if at all the price reduces as a result of the reduction in demand mid to long term?
Thank you, Verner, and good afternoon, everyone. Congratulations to the entire team at the African Chamber. This is a very well put together book that actually speaks to the reality of where we are going and where the world is today post-COVID. Yes, true to form. Look, I think the question, the answer is already, we've been forced to answer the question, right? The pandemic put all the major producers, especially on the continent of Africa, in a very, very resource-driven mode to actually change our ways in deep diving into cost first. I remember, and I framed it, in April last year, we sold 1 million barrels of crude oil at $19.46. So you can imagine the losses, but that forced our position to reevaluate our position in looking at how to do things better, how to do things cheaper, but not compromising on safety, which is very important in the oil and gas sector. Now, the true position is, from what we have seen and what we are doing and what we did, is first, the pandemic put us all in panic mode. That drove us first, not understanding what is happening, is to safely keep our people safe and secure in the operation mode. In the first couple of months, it was very difficult because we had to set up proper testing mechanics and mechanism in keeping the rotation of how oil and gas industries run, in keeping the rotation running properly. So that's one of the key things that was put into action. And today, believe it or not, a lot of the operators are now much better at it, because first is safety first, keeping our people safe and secure. And the rotation is now getting into a proper routine that people are now swapping 28 days on, 28 days off, and keeping the operations in a stable mode, keeping it going. That's the thing. Now, going to your question, looking at, can African operators keep, or producers keep prices below 30? It depends on where you are. If you look at a country like Nigeria, because of the extenuating circumstances, operating expenses will naturally be a bit higher than other climes. I'll give you an example. If for us, we're operating onshore, Western Delta, we're having to make sure there's additional money has been spent on aging facilities that's got to be maintained. We bought an asset from Shell, Total, and ENI. This asset's been on, some of them operating since the 60s and the 70s. So you can imagine the wear and tear on a lot of these assets. So there's a lot of systems and facilities upgrade that is going to cost money, that is going to take time, and in time, that is adding to your operating cost. That's one. The second thing that is peculiar to the Delta of Nigeria is security. We're having to spend a lot more money around keeping our people safe, keeping our people secure. And that means having secured compounds, secure transport services. Again, as we all know in the industry, it comes with additional cost. The third important thing is that is critical to the industry is making sure with all these things, we are maintaining higher standards of health and safety. So that way we can keep our assets insured in keeping the business going. So all in all, looking at where we are, we've responded. The pandemic has happened. COVID is still here. The industry's responded well, and we're trying to get better and even better at it in trying to reduce our costs. Global positioning, contractors are looking at working. So everyone is open to negotiations today, which is helping the industry, and people like us can breathe better.
Thanks for that. Now, Nosizwe, let me turn and ask you the same thing sort of for South Africa, which is looking at gas, offshore and gas developments. Is South Africa ready with the petroleum industry bill, with the petroleum bill, which is currently being assessed in that sense? What is your take?
Hi, good afternoon to the listeners and to everybody. So you asked me two questions. You said, is South Africa ready? So I would say that, yes, I think South Africa is ready. Why do I say South Africa is ready? If you look at the book that we are launching today, there's a whole area which talks about regulatory certainty. and how regulatory certainty is very important for investments in the oil, gas, and energy sector. So finally, after a long journey of moving from the Minerals and Petroleum Development Act, we have got a couple of versions, and finally, we now are at the point where we've got a bill that deals directly with what and how upstream should look like. Previously, as you know, South Africa being a very strong mining country, the Petroleum Act was falling under the Minerals Petroleum Development Act, which caused a lot of uncertainty. And then it took a while to separate this and bundle it and actually come up with this Upstream Development Act. So from the perspective of saying, have we got regulation that deals with the upstream? I would say that yes, there is a regulation dealing with the upstream. Obviously, within that regulation, there are a couple of concerns from different stakeholders about certain of the provisions which are within that act. And I guess the balancing act right now for the authorities is to ensure that you are able to, yes, have regulatory certainty, yes, have a bill that assists you to drive ownership of your resources to be beneficial for your company and for the people, but at the same time balancing with encouraging investment by giving certainty in terms of so many aspects within the bill, including the transitional aspects, the financial issues, so that investors can be clear what is it that they exactly clear what they're up against and what risks they have to mitigate. So I would say this has been a positive journey. As you know, the Upstream Development Act was actually, the bill was actually put out for public consent in what many people and critics would say was actually a relatively record time by the time they finally came up with that bill. So that's to be commended. The issue of the engagement and the general sort of engagement within the country has also taken time. But I think by the time we get to the end, when we get to the end of those type of processes, we have something that at least is able to bring that regulatory certainty, but at the same time, try and address. You're not going to be able to please everybody all the time, but you must be able to please some people some of the time and bring in a regulation that people can know, these are my risks and this is how I can mitigate the risks.
Thank you on that. Derek, let me come to you. Kola mentioned security in Nigeria being a driver of cost. We have a question here from Andrew Sekandi, which is also talking about security concerns in Mozambique. Certainly, what particular best practices are you proposing in that sense? Governments or even operators need to consider when operating in this particular environment?
Yeah, so one of the things I'll tell you, Verner, first of all, let me say thank you to you and the team. Outstanding book, as mentioned by all. And me and my team at Energy and Natural Resource Security Incorporated are delighted to be a part of it and delighted to add value. We think that this whole notion of energy security, not the way Daniel Yergin talks about it, where he really means geopolitics and resiliency, but really the native and intuitive concept of energy security, which is critical energy infrastructure asset protection, right? Anything that is upstream, midstream, downstream, transmission, generation, distribution needs to have at the nascent stages of that program's development, and any of those stages of the energy life cycle, they need to have security and the protection of that asset as a core part of, again, the development of the asset. And it needs to be viewed almost as a core component of financial risk mitigation. I would say that some of the issues around protecting these assets all fall under the rubric of staying vigilant, particularly in a COVID and post-COVID environment. The staying vigilant issue really is a talking point directed at the CEOs, the owners, operators, also the investors and insurers of these assets that exist in these emerging markets throughout Africa. One of the things Jovita has mentioned is that there is a problem in Africa with this IT/OT environment where you have the digital world connecting to the operational physical world. And one of the problems in Africa is that the systems that make that happen are legacy systems. And so there are many attack vectors from the cyber perspective that make those assets vulnerable. When you look at what's happening both in West Africa, East Africa, and even now in some parts of Southern Africa, there are heightened concerns at the state level, enacted by state actors and non-state actors in terms of where they are directly targeting energy assets, both onshore and offshore. So again, the narrative to and the discussion with the CEOs, the owners, operators, investors, insurers of these assets has to be one around vigilance, around good corporate governance from the standpoint of including risk mitigation, physical, cyber, technical security solutions deployed against the operation of that asset to ensure their security. That has to be done in the beginning, and then a monitored key performance indicator over time as those assets operate. Specific to Africa, one of the challenges that operators have, and again, this is from North Africa to East Africa to West Africa to South Africa, Southern Africa, it is the issue of legacy systems. It is the issue of looking at security from a reactive standpoint and not a proactive standpoint. And then this confluence of both state actor and non-state actor targeting of energy assets as a primary means to get their point heard. And you'll see this from extremist groups to governments that don't like other governments. And a lot of this can happen really on a low cost perspective. A lot of these attacks happen in a low cost perspective, but cause great cost impact on the back end, whether it's a physical attack or a cyber attack. You take a look at some of the things that happen outside of Africa, like with drone attacks that happen in Saudi Arabia. Again, low cost attack, high impact, high cost outcomes, right? And so I know Kola is facing some serious challenges in the Niger Delta that are really impacting his ability to optimize and monetize his asset. And you see that happening throughout the continent. And so if there's anything that I would say as a subject matter expert on the protection of energy assets, whether it's something onshore, offshore, anything that is oil and gas, power utility, renewable, hydro or nuclear in nature, that it's this, hey, create a good system up front that addresses the physical and cyber and technical components of your asset, and then make it a C-suite key performance indicator imperative that you address those issues, those physical, cyber, and technical security components of your asset so that you can maintain a good financial risk posture, and you can ensure ultimately what? Continuity of operations and resiliency for that asset. And part of what I think needs to happen, Verner, and I think the book does a good job of this, is that there needs to be an education or at least a consistent narrative or theme out there addressing these issues. And I think that the book really does that. So again, I'd say I want to round that out by saying two things, really one thing, and I want to tie it to what Jovita talked about earlier. It is this IT, OT, this information technology and operational technology environment that comes together. It's something that African operators really need to take a look at so that they can then operate in this Industry 4.0 environment that Jovita is talking about.
Thanks, Derek, for what is really an extensive view in that sense. Jovita, environmental concerns keep on popping up significantly these days, more than in the past. What are you seeing with respect to strategy when you advise some of the major players in the oil industry or the stakeholders? What are the proposed solutions if you were looking at 5 years down the line? What are you seeing is likely to happen so that those stakeholders involved in the sector should brace themselves for that? I know the book talks quite extensively about that, but what are you seeing, just in brief?
Exactly, and briefly, just to again, I would strongly encourage folks who haven't order their copies of this book to do so. This topic of the environment, of safety, is covered in the book at some really good level that I was quite impressed. What I've been saying in the last several years when it comes to the environment is that energy companies are actually becoming good stewards of the environment. The unfortunate truth is that the messaging out there is different. Most people view the energy industry as polluters. But when you start peeling the layers and looking at what they've been doing, the big companies, the smaller ones, they are actually stewards of the environment, right? BP, Shell, ExxonMobil, all those companies have very good sustainability record and plan. Now, what I believe needs to be done, first of all, is the narrative, the messaging. And then secondly, for countries in Africa, you have Akin talked of, the Delta area where you have lots of operators to really dig in and work with local governments to, talk to the people what their needs are. Now, as a technologist, what my guidance is going to be is that these oil and gas companies and the chamber are already doing a great job in that, is to work with these companies to develop governance strategies around infrastructure, around assets. I'll give you an example of the company that I helped. This company operates about 3,500 flares. As you well know, you fly over oceans where you have drilling activities, you're going to see all the oil flares, and they are usually contributors to emission of smoke. And for the last several years, some of the clients I've worked with have done a fantastic job to introduce technology to control oil flares, to reduce, the dirty flames that come out of the oil rigs, and it has worked. So as we look into the future post-COVID, Derek has said a lot about this already. You're going to see this continued infusion, convergence of the operational technology world, which is where the oil and gas industry has deep experience, coming in contact with the information technology world in this thing called IoT or industrial IoT. So if you are an oil rig operator, you're going to start asking yourself, how do I manage my sensors so that they do not fail? Because when you wait until the sensor fails and you react, as Derek just said, then you are behind the curve, you're going to incur costs, you're going to be penalized by some regulator. But there are technologies out there that you can put in place to measure put metrics in the sensors to make sure that they don't fail. When I say sensors, it could be a valve, it could be an actuator, it could be any of the things that you find in the OT world. You could manage that from anywhere. You could manage that from your iPhone, from a tablet, anywhere. So there is really a lot out there that we can do to help these companies to become more operational efficient and to actually be competitive. I believe we could go in the after hours here to talk about competition in the $30 economy. I believe we can, but that is a topic for another day.
Yes, thanks. If I just keep that same trail, I don't know, Kola, if you're still there, or same question could go to Akinwole. Actually, we're talking environment here, possibly also gas to power, which is also another way to be able to tackle environment. Akin, what are you seeing, particularly if you look at places like Nigeria, where there has been traditional flaring, but there's a significant demand? What are you seeing? How is the industry developing in a manner that also tackles environmental concerns?
Thank you. Well, I think Kola is back on. Maybe he wants to speak first. I'll go after.
Thanks, Akin. Thanks, Verner. Look, I think Nigeria is sitting in a very, very good place when it comes to the environmental, meeting targets. I think the government has pushed a lot in a lot of the gasification projects and forcing a lot of the companies in making sure gas obligations, we're sticking to it, and also making sure the claims and the charges for flaring is coming to place. So it's very important that the government's focus now is understanding the exclusive use of gas to help energize the whole energy value chain. So there's a big push even in using gas in cars today. So this is all the resolve of what NNPC is pushing, and pushing all the IOCs and the LOCs like ourselves in making sure we're adapting in proper standards, in making sure that focuses on the gas sector, and clean energy is a very core around that. Okay.
Thanks, Kola. I echo Kola's words, but I know that Paul Joy had asked a question around the possibility of the power sector, gas power sector, actually being able to contract and compete at similar levels as you would have solar at 10 cents or less. And that's a very valid question. And it sort of ties it into, not just in Nigeria, but in so many other parts of Africa, where just by way of conscious living, and I think COVID also was able to assist us to bring that to fore. By way of lifestyle, it's just a lot better to have your environment cleaner, tidier, and less pollutant in the things you do. And so that in itself is going to affect the way we all do things. And the oil sector is not left out. So beyond the regulatory enforcement that is being driven by governments, boards of various oil companies, there is the notion of commercializing gas. And this drive, rather than have gas being flared, rather than have it being injected, the notion of taking gas that typically would have gone to waste and bringing it commercially viable in very clean and safe and sustainable condition, it's something that even at Genesis, in a very small scale, we continue to investigate and drive very, very closely. Today, for example, in Zimbabwe, for an off-grid power to a mining company, a gold company, we are driving a solution that is able to deliver long-term gas to power to this client of just around about 9.8 cents. So my response to Paul Joy is that the industry is maturing with amazing technology, American technology, Indian, Chinese, etc., that are very, very strong in producing small-scale LNG, in producing compressed natural gas. And the Canadians are very good at this, compressed natural gas, and in a way that your cost of production is well below 7 cents. Now, if you can combine your investment factors of production, if you can get long-term capital, low hurdle rate on your equity, then it is possible for you to have a capacity investment recovery charge of no more than 3 cents. So in a sense, gas is becoming more competitive, it's becoming more cleaner. We love solar, but we need gas. So that's the way you have to look at it. You can't say it's either or. Africa for the next 50 years, my very humble opinion, will continue to rely on gas to power, because we need to industrialize. Whilst I love solar and it helps my uncle and aunt in the villages, but frankly, solar is not going to power a steel rolling company. That's not going to happen, at least not yet. It would come to that in time. So yes, in summary, I agree that solar is critical, but gas is becoming more and more critical in that respect as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Akin. Remi, to you, we can see from what Kola and Akin are saying and all the others that the environment is certainly taking a bigger role in terms of the energy space. Are you seeing that being replicated in the demands for training across the board? Because we all know that we would need the right kind of personnel to be able to take care of those changes and drive those changes further.
The answer is yes, definitely yes. And it comes from everywhere in the world. So there is a request for training on tomorrow's energy. And here I'd like to come back to the words of Akin, because at least the message we always send to our participants is to say, okay, don't spend time and energy on saying that this energy is the one and this other energy is not. You just waste energy doing this. We all know that the solution is mix. We need a mix of energy, and the mix of the energy, which is the right one in the US or in Europe, may not be the one appropriate for Africa, and the one appropriate for Algeria may not be the one for Mozambique again. Okay, so we should relax on this and make people aware that they need to adapt their the components of their mix locally, and we should not impose anything to the people. Okay.
Thanks for that. Nosizwe, I just want to take you on to the potential of cross-border projects in a post-COVID environment. Now, we've seen the free trade document being signed. The question now to me becomes, from what you're seeing, and this is also something which has been covered in the book, what are we likely to see with respect to transnational projects in terms of gas or power or other energy projects? Quite often, it's not always the case that every single country has the same kind of resources. So what are the dynamics there that you're seeing with respect to cross-border project implementation in the energy space?
Yes, Verner, thanks for asking me that question. And once again, let me just say that what I'm going to talk about, or what I'm going to say, is a fraction of what is in the book. In the book, we've got quite a lot that covers about some of these issues. So in fact, the issue of cross-border projects becomes really important in the context of Africa, simply because of what has just been mentioned previously. First and foremost, you've got the issue of the energy mix and other countries that actually do not have any access to the resources, as it were. But if we can, and that is a great opportunity that we have now post-COVID, is that if we can increase the market, our market here on the continent, and we can regionalize some of our projects, it will really actually beneficial, and it is becoming beneficial for the continent. I mean, I could give some examples. If we look at Mozambique around the corner here, with the amount of natural gas that Mozambique has, and we look at South Africa, and we look at the power demand or the electricity demand and the industrialization vision that South Africa has, clearly, it tells you that there is a huge opportunity in terms of doing these cross-border industrialization plans. Now, this has been done before already in Mozambique, as you know. One of those plants, the aluminium smelter, which is Mozal, was a cross-border project, as it were, in the sense that it was built in Mozambique, but the shareholders and the benefits, the shareholders are South African shareholders, some of them mixed, obviously they're also Australian, and it is exported to Australia. So there is opportunity, and I think now COVID has brought us this very, very strong opportunity to be able to relook at the value chains. The global value chains have been disrupted. So in Africa, we need to sit down, look at how we harmonize some of our regulatory aspects, tariffs and things like that. If you talk about the Africa Trade Agreement, under the Africa Trade Agreement, we have to start sitting and talking about our tariffs. We start talking about the projects which can be regionalized, grow the market, and start becoming how do I put it? Remi said when we started the conversation, the key word here is itself. How can Africa assist itself to recover post-COVID? And these are some of the issues, they're huge opportunities. All I can say, Verner, is that actually the African continent is poised for growth post-COVID. It is poised for growth. And I think in the book, that the AEC has covered this quite well in terms of the different facets, which are going to also have a great impact, even on the local content, are going to have a great impact on the skilling. We need to upskill or reskill quite a number of our employees, and that can also be done in a cross-border manner, when I look at the mature oil producing countries like Nigeria, there is so much this side of Africa can actually learn from the mature countries, Nigeria, Gabon, Equatorial Guinea, because on the side of the continent, which is the southern part, we are right at the beginning. So how can we utilize all this knowledge and all this skill to be able to actually cross-pollinate knowledge and cross-pollinate markets? The intra-Africa trade is very negligible, as you know. So there are those huge opportunities, and we at Raise Africa are looking at how we can also take advantage of some of these opportunities that are offering themselves post-COVID. Thanks, Verner.
Thank you very much. I'll start a final round of questions with Derek. There is a question here from one of the viewers, which is asking as to what recommendations you would have for Gulf of Guinea leaders with respect to tackling the piracy issues in the region.
Sure. That problem set has been around for quite some time, and there's been almost, I'd say, or let me say it this way: the transnational approach to get that problem set solved has been strategically talked about, but not effectively executed. Okay, and one of the problems that is missing is this kind of alert system, this Gulf of Guinea alert system. There are things that are in place right now, but they're not coordinated at the country level in a manner that lets people take that kind of strategic information and then action it accordingly. One of the things that our firm did in Equatorial Guinea, but it got impacted by COVID, is we were going to start a big maritime assessment to look at all of the offshore assets in Equatorial Guinea, and we had put together a great plan to get after assessing those assets and then protecting those assets. But one of the challenges was going to be, how do you integrate that into a more holistic system throughout the Gulf of Guinea? And so a recommendation I'd like to make to all the decision makers in the Bight of Benin, Gulf of Guinea, is they need to pay more than lip service to this whole concept of having a strategic alert system that is then plugged into actionable methodologies at the tactical level. We were in the process of doing that, but COVID put that project on hold, and we're looking forward to initiating that, at least for Equatorial Guinea, post-COVID. And let me also too address another question I saw, Verner. It was about Mozambique, right? And some of the security concerns and issues in Mozambique. That is a hornet's nest, and we have to be forthright about it. It's good to be optimistic about Mozambique, but we have to be realistic about what's happening there. There is an internal issue that has transnational influence in it, from an international terrorist almost kind of perspective. And it's going to have to be a whole of nation approach, real instruments of national power in Mozambique to kind of get after that problem set. So it cannot be the hiring of some kind of international security firm that's a private military contracting outfit to go and address the problem. Mozambique tried that with the Russians and some others, and it failed miserably. And one of the problems that they have, and one of the ways that I think other African nations can address kind of these issues where they're trying to optimize and monetize their natural resource assets, but they have these kinds of inherent security problems at play in their environments, is they need to really look at developing information operation campaigns, okay, where you start to give a narrative to the local population about how this energy asset is a part of the public's best interest, and have the on-ground citizens, somewhat like the methodology that's used in Nigeria, where you have the community liaison officers at play, where there's a media narrative, there's an information narrative that the government puts in place to really try and let the citizens know who occupy where these assets are, that if we optimize and monetize this asset, you are directly going to benefit, you and your family. Partner with us as we try to optimize and monetize this asset. That's called an information operations campaign. And again, that needs to be woven in holistically with whatever security superstructure they put in place to protect those assets. That doesn't need to happen just in Mozambique. It needs to happen in Nigeria. It needs to happen in Equatorial Guinea. It needs to happen both with onshore and offshore assets. And so as these nations and independent operators, these LOCs like Kola, go to optimize and monetize their assets, they need to look at not just the physical and cyber and technical security solutions they can deploy, but they also need to start to include these information operation campaigns that include the local citizens of where these assets are. Does that make sense, man?
That makes perfect sense. Great and very informative also. Thank you very much. Kola, a final one for you. This one is coming from Ken McGee, and Ken is wanting to know how can local content benefit from the current post-COVID situation. So I suspect it's also around the absence of travel in that sense. So how have local companies like yourselves or regional companies, of course, because you operate beyond Nigerian borders, been able to benefit from the unfortunate, COVID situation?
The good thing, Verner, is that the post-COVID, as it stands, as it is today, when we look at it operationally, is actually benefiting the local content conditions a lot more. Why? Because I'll give you an example. We've got a couple of problems with compression, and the company that normally supports us sits in the United Kingdom. Unfortunately, their engineers cannot travel. So there's a lot of technology being deployed, working remotely now with local companies who are carrying out the troubleshooting, feeding information back, and being able to put us back online. So reality is the local companies that are savvy enough in incorporating technology and their know-how locally are able to benefit in growing their business, in being that backstop support to global companies that cannot travel because of the COVID pandemic. So local content is seeing a lot of resurging position by this type of act, relationships and partnerships that's now been put in play in making that happen. Another big area that we're seeing a lot of local participation is where we got the support engineers. Today, we had a lot of foreign engineers coming on rotation, drilling in the drilling space, and core engineering and compression and stuff and gas lifts. Today, all this is now local, the same kind of support services, local companies biting with the bullet and taking the bull by the horn and trying to provide these services. So I think what is going to happen, what we are seeing happen, is local companies are now taking advantage, building and fostering partnerships that's now forced because the international companies cannot travel on shore, and is now enforcing what true local content is by making sure local companies participate in the value chain that is now creating value locally as well.
Thank you for that. Akinwole, final one for you. The book also talks about transition, looking at retooling coal plants to LNG. And there's a question here from Andrew Bema, which is talking about Mozambique looking to refit and retool coal-fired plants. I suspect it's not just Mozambique, but across the continent with gas. So what are the key obstacles there for such, including pipeline construction and stakeholder engagement? So what key obstacles are you seeing as you move to support countries to change and to retool?
Yes, thank you, Verner, and thanks, Andrew, for that question. Verner, you and I were on a call yesterday for another country where this came up. So it's becoming a real current theme around cleaner energy solution for either dirty fuel or unclean thermal. I think that one of the obstacles you face along the way, not specifically in construction of the gas pipeline, will be the logistics. So depending on where the asset sits, and depending on where the nearest, if there is a gas field in country that is accessible to that power plant, and in this case in Mozambique, I'm not sure what the specific details are, but the distance of the gas location to to the power plant is critical. If there's no gas in country and there's a port that is amenable to notion of importing LNG to that country, and again, depending on where the location is, if you have to then retruck in order to get to the destination, I think that transportation would be one of them. Second, of course, would be security, depending on the country in question. And so if you have to have what we call the virtual pipeline of trucking LNG from port to consuming location, then security becomes very, very important. And of course, we have experts like Derek at the Africa Energy Chamber that can support and advise whatever is appropriate. But in all, I want to say that this is a great innovation that is coming up on the continent. We are involved in a similar project in Mali, where we're investigating very closely a plant that is running on HFO, and we're working with the owners to run on LNG, imported LNG. The beauty of cost savings, environmental friendly gas versus HFO, the lower cost of operation and maintenance, all of this fantastic outcomes is something that should be encouraged. But I'm going to vote again that everyone should really take the time to buy that book, not just because of one particular story, because I think I read from my brother Mohammed asking for to be pointed into the right page. That book, the African Energy Chamber, is taking the time to put it's power packed with a lot of information with case studies. So I will encourage us to get a copy of it and read it back to back. I think it will be very useful.
Thanks, Akin. I think I should also buttress that point. This is a book there's been a lot of thought going through it, and then the whole planning and putting it together as a compendium of amazing thought process from industry participants with on-ground knowledge of how things can be done, and hopefully things can be done much better. So it's highly recommended to everyone, because it gives a very, very important insight across the value chains known as the oil and gas and energy space. And then it's a very, very commendable job, I must say, by the chamber. So congratulations to the entire team, contributors. And I think this is the beginning of many, as we take a particular point face in the industry and trying to make a marked difference in the entire value chain measure in energy sector. So thank you very much, Verner, and to the entire team.
Thank you. Nosizwe, final one for you. This is coming from one of our participants also, where they are asking, with respect to the attractivity of the industry when it comes to hiring young people, given his comparison with the UK, where the oil and gas or the energy sector was being looked critically with respect to emissions. And so what does the industry in Africa need to do to attract great talent?
That's for me, Verner? Yes. Okay, look, I think we in Africa, we have a great advantage in the sense that we have a young population, and that young population is being currently put through the different stages of preparation. And that preparation is happening when we heard earlier this IO and O, information technology and operation technology is converging. So I believe that in terms of the skilling and the training, if you go to any of the universities in South Africa, let me talk about South Africa in particular, you will find that issues regarding to the environmental matters are already being addressed at most tertiary places of learning. And I believe that must be the same case for most of the countries on the continent. What it means is that by the time you are recruiting, you find that those graduates, they themselves are actually very, there's a thrust to say that they will only associate themselves with companies that are respectful of the environment and have got certain approach towards sustainability. this is now becoming a push. You can notice it in society that the push for all of these things is not only coming, let's say, from a government perspective or from an ONG perspective, but even from the young people that are now being groomed through the tertiary system. So yes, companies are very encouraging of appointing or recruiting people that have already gone or who do have that that aspect in terms of our environmental savvy. And the reason being the pressure that oil and gas companies are being put under in terms of, you know, the environment. It has now become part of the cultural nuance to say that we need to, from a sustainability perspective, environment is being put as number one. I think one of the colleagues mentioned it earlier to say that the oil and gas industry itself is now becoming the champion of a cleaner energy solutions and also about the sustainability of the environment. So yes, I think that is a wave that is now beginning to happen. Obviously, the regulations as well from environmental ministries are also having an impact. And obviously, most of the countries are signatories to different types of protocol, which are dealing with how we should move in terms of the environmental management. So I do believe that yes, it is an important part of the recruitment process, and it should continue to become an important part of the recruitment process.
Final one for you, Remi. I know public-private partnerships is something you think very strongly about in terms of taking on the challenges in a post-COVID area. Do you want to maybe say a final word with respect to that as you see that taking a center stage to effectively tackle some of the bigger problems in the sector?
I definitely see it as an efficient way to increase the local content, because this money is here. Usually by law, international operators must dedicate money for training and now for local content. The money is around now. The point is not to waste this money. And there are some good discussions in the book regarding this, and I feel it's very important to consider. And to come back to the previous words of Nosizwe regarding the oil and the energy industry for the younger generation, I would say, let's imagine I'm around 22 years old. Okay, so it was not yesterday, but the day before yesterday. I would definitely choose again working in the energy industry, because I feel there are wonderful things to do for at least for the upcoming 50 years.
Jovita, you're smiling on that one. It looks like you're.
Yeah, I am. I am, because it is one of the biggest threats that the industry faces, meaning attracting skilled workers and keeping skilled workers. During a normal downturn, the energy industry typically loses about 35% of its good talent. And then what we also know is from a knowledge management standpoint is the average age of an oil and gas employee is about 56 years old. So it is a very, quote unquote, old industry in terms of knowledge. And as Nosizwe eloquently put it, most young people want to be in a place which is, quote unquote, cool, the Apple, the Google, the Facebooks of the world. They don't see the energy industry as cool. And they are also associated with pollution and all that stuff. So my take is that, as Remi just said, the energy industry is actually a technology industry. All energy company is a technology company. They have ton and ton and ton of very cool technology. If you think of digital twin, you think of managing an oil rig 10,000 miles away. That is awesome technology that you would not find in some of these places, right? So to me, I see that as number one, for us to appropriately manage knowledge, which is we should be careful how we lay off during downturns and not lose those people because they go and they never come back. also adopt and embrace the notion that we are a technology industry, meaning the oil and gas industry is actually a technology industry, and to treat technology as a strategic business asset, not as a cost center. Because frequently we see technology being the first thing to be cut during downturn. And that is a problem, because when you do so, you lose not only your strategic edge, but you also lose the people. So putting technology front and center into everything we do is going to be key in this new world of IT-OT convergence, which you've heard over and over and over again. So one final word here is that what I would give as guidance is that the oil and gas industry need to implement IT-OT operational convergence strategy for managing this increased collaboration that we're going to see in the post-COVID world. That we need to do. But and it is easy for us to do so, especially on the eastern side of Africa, as Nosizwe mentioned, which has very, very low technology debt. These are new oil and gas industries. They can leapfrog, abandon all the old architecture that some of the older companies are laden with, and just embrace the cool stuff, the same way most Africans leapfrogged and started using smartphones.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Thank you for those who have been listening from across the world. I would encourage everyone to go onto Amazon and all the other platforms which have been put out there. Grab a copy, engage with the chamber, engage with everybody who you see here. There's loads of interesting stuff happening in the energy industry. We at the chamber believe energy is at the center of development. It is critical for development. And so it's an important topic for us to engage, to continue engaging with. The chamber is here for you guys. It is here to be able to voice all what you think is important with respect to energy matters. Thank you very much, Remi, Nosizwe, Kola, for making time, Jovita, certainly, Akinwole, and of course, Mr. Derek Campbell for being able to make time to dial in here and share some thoughts around security matters and energy matters on the continent. Thank you very much for dialing in, and see you soon. Bye.
Thanks, Verner.